Well, what's up, my friend? Today's episode of Real English Radio is all about small talk. The introverts hate it, the extroverts need it, and so many of us don't know how to do it properly. So in this episode, I'm going to share a simple technique for making small talk and the mindset you need in order to apply this technique correctly. Now, you know I'm not one to waste time, my friend. So let's get right into this episode. The video clip I'm about to play for you is of a public speaking coach named Yasir Khan. He's going to lay out a common problem that people face when trying to make small talk and 2 simple ways to avoid it. So let's check it out.
Never do this if you meet someone for the first time and you want to make a good first impression. Hey, what's your name? Okay, what do you do for a living? How long have you been doing that? Do you like it? Okay, and where are you coming from? All right, you having a good day so far? You ever met someone who just barraged you with questions the moment you met them? It's because they don't know how to make small talk. And because they don't know how to make small talk, they throw the ball to the other person by asking a question so they do the work of lifting the conversation. And they're just thinking in their head, what's the next question I can ask? What can I keep saying to keep this conversation going? Here are 2 things you can do to fix that. 1, if you ask a question, ask what and how questions that get them to tell you a story. How did you find out about this event? The answer to that is going to be a story. Or number 2, you ask them a question, they give you a response, and you reflect on what they've just said before you ask the following question. You said you live downtown. I used to live downtown for 3 years, but I had to move out because it was just way too busy. How long have you been there? Because what this does is it gives them more information about you so they have more ammunition to then come up with conversational topics. This increases the volume of the information being shared both parties and makes the small talk a lot less awkward.
All right, my friends. So now that we have a basic overview of the problem and a couple of ways to deal with it, let's break this down a bit further with some relatable examples and talk about the underlying mindset you should have when trying to build a conversation with someone. So first, let's review the problem itself, which is bombarding someone with countless questions when you first meet them. And for most people, this can be incredibly overwhelming because when you ask question after question after question, it can start to feel like a job interview. And a conversation should never feel like a job interview. And for some people, being overwhelmed with questions can also feel awkwardly invasive, as if you're trying to suck too much information out of them too quickly, which makes them suspicious of your intentions. Now, the reason a lot of people tend to use this tactic is simply because they don't know how to make small talk and they don't know how to go from small talk to a more interesting conversation. So they just keep asking questions because it's the only way they know how to get someone to talk. And to be clear, there's absolutely nothing wrong with asking questions. It's just that the questions should be purposeful. They should always be satisfying a genuine curiosity and or leading the conversation in a particular direction, not just occupying silence. So instead of the typical approach that many unskilled people take, Yasir suggests that we do one of 2 things to improve our small talk. The first one, to ask what and how questions that encourage storytelling. For example, how did you find out about this event? Because this leads to more engaging responses and less forced conversation. Now, the second thing, reflect on their response before asking the next question. For example, if they mention living downtown, share something relevant about yourself before continuing. For example, oh, I used to live downtown too, but I had to move because it was just too busy. How long have you been there? Now, if you ask me, these are just 2 parts of the same technique. So let me break this down and explain how I like to think about it. So first, we'll talk about the idea of asking what and how questions. And I'm actually going to add why questions to this tactic because why questions naturally encourage someone to explain whatever it is they're feeling, thinking, saying, or doing, which keeps the conversation going. Now, in order to apply this technique properly, it's important that we understand the reason we're making small talk in the first place. And that reason is to get an idea of the type of person we're talking to and then decide if we want to pursue a more meaningful conversation and get to know them better. And this, of course, is just a generalization. There are many other times when we make small talk for other reasons, but that's outside the scope of this episode. So, the mindset you need to develop is one of curiosity. You should want to know what they're feeling, thinking, saying, or doing, why they're feeling, thinking, saying, or doing it, and how that affects them and or their lives. And by training yourself to seek the answers to these 3 simple questions, you'll cultivate the ability to make small talk with anyone who's willing to engage with you. And you'll realize that you can learn a lot about someone in a very short amount of time as long as you ask the right questions. So let me give you a few examples. Let's imagine that you're talking to someone who's learning to speak your language. A very common situation for any of us who are learning languages or teaching languages to other people. Now, you might think, or you might imagine, the most common question that comes up is, why are you learning my language? Or what do you think is the most challenging part of learning my language? And these are perfectly fine questions. Absolutely nothing wrong with them. But there's 100 other questions that you could ask to get deeper into somebody's mind and how they think. For example, instead of asking them why they're learning your language, and they're probably going to say, oh, for work or for travel, or I'm just passionate about languages, you might ask them, well, what's your impression of our culture? And the reason, at least in my opinion, that this is a bit more of an interesting question is because language is one thing and it's fascinating to me, and I'm sure many other people, but asking about culture is introducing something that is relevant to both of you and interesting to both of you, because for them, learning your language and consequently about your culture means that everything about this language and culture is new and curious to them, or at least it should be. And for you, it's your language and culture. So I'm sure you have a lot to say about it. And the fact that you guys come from different places means you're going to have very different perspectives on this one topic. So naturally, you're going to have something to debate or different opinions to exchange, which leads to a more interesting conversation. Something much more interesting than, oh, I'm learning for work. Oh, I'm learning for travel. Oh, you like to travel? Me too. You understand? A question like that can easily lead you into a 30-minute conversation about the differences between your culture and that person's culture. You might ask them something like, how will your life be different once you learn my language? What do you imagine is going to happen once you can actually speak my language? How many people in your family speak a foreign language? Is it common to learn foreign languages in your culture? Why or why not? What does your family think about your desire to learn my language? What does your family think about your desire to travel abroad? Again, there's 100 questions you can ask. And all of these questions have the intention of learning more about what this person's thinking, feeling, saying, or doing, and why they're doing it, and how it's going to affect them. This is how you can very quickly and very easily learn more about other people. And these are just the questions. We'll get to the statements in a second, adding your own bits of information or sharing your own opinions so that it doesn't feel like an interview. But right now, we're just focused on open-ended questions. So here's another example. Let's imagine you're talking to someone who smokes weed and you don't smoke weed. Again, there's 100 questions you could ask this person. Why do you smoke weed? How does it make you feel? What does it do for you exactly? What's your favorite thing to do after smoking weed? How long have you been smoking weed? What do your family and friends think about the fact that you smoke weed? How are weed smokers perceived in your country? Who inspired you to try smoking weed? You see what I'm saying? All these, they seem like random questions, or maybe they seem overly simple, too simple to ask. Or like, oh, there's no way this is going to lead to an interesting conversation. But I'm telling you, if you pay attention, all these questions are just asking this person what they think or what their experience has been and why they're doing what they're doing. These are things that only they can tell you. And oftentimes people will be happy to tell you because people love to talk about themselves. They love other people to sit there and listen to what it is that they think or believe. People love this. So here's another example. Imagine you're talking to someone who does a job that you know nothing about. A software engineer or a sailor or a pilot or a chef, a bus driver. It really doesn't matter. But they work in a career field you know nothing about. Well, why did you choose that career field? What have you learned, not just about your job, but about life after so many years working in that particular career field? What life skills have you learned after doing this job for so many years? What would you be doing if you weren't doing this particular job? Did you have any other dream careers when you were growing up? Any other careers that you started and gave up on or changed your mind about? There's a million questions. What advice would you give to someone who wants to do the same job, somebody who wants to get started in that career field? What do your parents think about your career choice? All of these are personal yet non-invasive questions that can lead to original answers, and then you, with time and practice, will learn how to take the conversation in a different direction, or at least to a deeper point. And understand that these are all just random examples, bro. I could give you a million of them. But the point is to get in the habit of trying to understand the way people think. What is it like to be them? What is it like to live their lives, to see things from their perspective? Because this will give you more information about the best way to engage with them. You understand? So moving on to part 2 of this tactic, which is reflecting on their response and adding something to it. Because as I said earlier, it's 2 things, but it's all involved in the same technique to make better small talk, asking more thoughtful questions and giving more thoughtful answers. So in order to avoid making the conversation feel like an interview or an interrogation, you must learn to go from seeking information to providing information. And this is crucial because most people will be more than happy to sit there and tell you about themselves. Because it pains me to say this, but I do believe it. Most people are painfully self-absorbed. Whether that's good or bad is up for debate. It's just what I believe. And so very few people will make an effort to reciprocate your curiosity by asking you to speak about yourself. And understand that this isn't always because of a lack of interest in you. It can sometimes just be a simple lack of conversational skill. Sometimes people are expecting you to share information about yourself voluntarily, just like they do. So when you don't do that, they assume it's because you don't want to. So that's the second part of this conversation tactic, volunteering relevant information about yourself in order to give the other person something to work with. Because people can't really ask you more questions about yourself or figure out what y'all should be talking about if they don't know anything about you and they don't know how to get you to talk. Because again, some people just lack that conversational skill, or they're so focused on themselves that they don't think to ask you anything about yourself. So let's use those same examples. Imagine you're talking to someone who's learning your language and you ask them, what's your impression of our culture? Like me, I might be talking to a Brazilian person and I ask them, what's your impression of American culture? What do you think about the US and our people and our way of life? And they say, man, I just notice Americans are so direct. Sometimes they can be so harsh with their words. And I might sit and think, yeah, I think you might be right about that. I notice when I talk to Brazilians, they have a much more indirect way of communicating. They don't want to offend people or hurt their feelings. Instead of saying, no, I don't want to do this, they'll say something like, oh, let me think about it and I'll let you know later. That's a statement. That's an observation. That's me providing my own opinion or speaking about my own experience, not just asking another question immediately. So now this person has a little bit of an idea of where I'm coming from or what I think about the situation. And now we can begin to exchange ideas on our culture and the differences and the pros and cons of the American way of life and the pros and cons of the Brazilian way of life. Instead of just saying, oh, you're from Brazil. Oh, football, beaches, Pelé, Ronaldinho. Oh, you're from the US, guns, fast food, cars. You know what I'm saying? It's like, you won't believe how incredibly easy this is, man. Once you just get into the habit of thinking this way about small talk, of engaging in this way, you will see how easy it is to go from, hey, what's your name, or what do you do, or where are you from, to something much more interesting. You just got to be curious, bro. And don't be afraid to share what it is that you think about what somebody said, even if you disagree. There's nothing wrong with that. So, the second example, somebody who smokes weed. Maybe you've never done it, you have no interest in doing it. That doesn't mean that you can't be curious about what life is like for them as a weed smoker. So if I say, what was your first time like? That's going to lead to a story about their first time smoking weed. In my case, I definitely have a story for that because I've been smoking weed for a long time. So then I share my first time smoking weed. And now we can connect on that level. We probably had similar experiences as first time weed smokers. what kind of weed we like, or have you smoked weed in other cities or other countries? You know what I mean? What does your family think about it? Here's what my family thinks. So what I'm trying to convey here is that the tactic is extremely simple, because after you ask a question, trying to understand what it is this person thinks or what they feel or what they've experienced, just stop and try to put yourself in their shoes and then ask yourself, what would I think or how would I feel if I were in that position? And even if you can't do that, just comment on what you think about what they've just told you. That's really all it is. If you can get in the habit of doing that before asking the next question and the next question and the next question, now you have a bit of back and forth. You understand? Think about it like tennis. I hit the ball over to you, and then you hit the ball back over to me, and we boom, 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 back and forth, back and forth. I know it's not easy in the beginning, man, because sometimes you may not think of anything to say. You don't know what to say, or questions don't come to your mind, or you don't know how to reflect on what people have said. But it's just a question of practice, bro. I promise you. I promise you. So finishing up with this third scenario, talking to someone who does a job that you know nothing about. And you ask them, well, what would you be doing if not that particular job? If you couldn't do this job, what else would you do? That's going to force them to think. I mean, really think, like, damn, what would I be doing if not this? That's an answer that only they can give you. It's a personal response. And you can reflect on the alternative career that they give you and imagine what it would be like to do that. Or you can make it about yourself and say, yeah, man, I'm doing this, but I would have loved to do that. If I weren't doing what I'm doing right now, I'd be doing this, this, and that. And if they're interested in you and a halfway decent conversationalist, they're going to ask you more about what you said. And that's how you start the back and forth, the back and forth. I hope this is making sense to you. I hope I'm not complicating something by over-explaining it, but I just really want you to understand how simple it is. I'm really trying to get you to understand if you just change the way you think about small talk, you will get so much better at it. Not overnight. I don't want to exaggerate, but you'll get much better at it very quickly. So why does this technique work? I've already kind of gotten into that a little bit, but I'll reiterate by saying this technique works because you're applying two fundamental skills of the art of conversation: asking interesting questions and making provocative statements. And I suggest you listen to episode number 8 of this podcast. The title is Good Conversations Have Lots of Doorknobs. And there you can hear a more in-depth explanation of this idea, asking questions and making statements. But the point is that asking open-ended questions and then answering those same questions before you ask another is an incredibly effective way to keep a conversation flowing in a way that feels natural. Everyone involved will be participating and thus feel more connected to each other. And it also works wonders when you're talking to someone who's a bit shy or anxious, because you'll be doing them the favor of constantly providing things to talk about, which is something that socially anxious people struggle with. But I don't want you to think that this technique is foolproof, all right? It doesn't work 100% of the time. Because if you or the person you're talking to has a low level of self-awareness, the conversation can easily fall off the rails. Or if you're just talking to someone who's not in the mood to make conversation or has decided that they're not interested in you, you can only make so much of an effort to keep a conversation going before you just realize it's not worth the energy. But I guarantee, if you employ this tactic, you will make much better small talk, as I said in the beginning, with anyone who's willing to engage with you. So let's review the common mistakes to avoid. Number 1, rapid fire questioning, bombarding someone with endless questions. Because this often comes off as invasive behavior, suspicious behavior. Why are you asking so many fucking questions, bro? Who are you? Is this a fucking interview? Is this an interrogation? Don't you have anything to say about yourself? Don't you have anything to say about anything, bro? You're just going to keep asking me questions? It's boring to people when you do that. Mistake number 2, oversharing. And what is oversharing? That's just it's another term for what happens when we often share too much information about ourselves at one time. So whether somebody asks us a question about ourselves or not, we end up just sharing so much about ourselves to an excessive degree, and it kind of turns off the other person because one, why are you talking so much about yourself? Two, I didn't ask you all of that shit. Three, is this a speech or a conversation, bro? Like, damn, take a minute to breathe and let me speak. You know? It often makes you look either self-absorbed or even insecure. So it's about finding that balance between asking thoughtful questions and sharing relevant information about yourself. And finally, mistake number 3. This one, man, is so easy to avoid, but it's such a common mistake, and it's not listening. We talk a lot on this podcast, and there's a lot of information online about how to be a better talker, how to be more charismatic, how to be more captivating with your words. And I think listening is one of the most underrated skills known to man. The best talkers are the best talkers because they know how to listen to people, in my opinion. Listening properly informs you on what you should say next. Listening properly tells you how to correctly interpret what somebody's saying and not saying. So by actually paying attention to someone and what they're saying and how they're saying it and why they're saying it, you're going to learn so much more about them. And they're going to feel it. You know when somebody's truly listening. It's not just because they're making eye contact. It's not just because they're asking tons of questions, but they're showing genuine interest. And it's by the way they respond to what you said that you know they're actually engaged with you in conversation. So don't skip this step, bro. Learn how to listen attentively with curiosity and show people that you're actually interested in what they're saying, and they'll be that much happier to talk to you. So the final step would be practicing. How do we get in the habit of making more small talk? And I would just say, you got to start small, man. Start small, whether it's with the people you live with or your girlfriend or your homeboys or people at work. Or if you're not working yet, maybe you're in university or something, at school, just wherever you're constantly around people in casual settings. Just start making small talk with these people. Think of anything to say and just say it, bro, and see where the conversation goes. Get comfortable with the conversation not really going anywhere in particular. You guys exchange a few words and then you go on about your day. Get comfortable with the act of doing that. Also get comfortable with silence and pauses. This is also underrated because a lot of times we think that small talk has to be constant talking. Otherwise, it's going to get awkward or the conversation is going to end. But pausing for a moment to think or let the other person think or just sitting in silence for a moment, I think is an underrated conversation. Let's call it a tool that you can use to advance a conversation. So get comfortable with that. Get comfortable with silence, with pauses, with the conversation ending after just a few minutes. Again, it's small talk. It's not meant to be life-changing. And also, I would say practice reflecting on what people say. That's another important one, is when you are listening to somebody and they say something personal, they share their opinion or they tell you a story, practice putting yourself in that person's shoes and wondering what you would think or how you would feel or what you would do in that situation. This is a form of practicing empathy, first of all, but it also gives you interesting things to say that are relevant to what was just said to you, which shows the person you're listening and interested. For example, just the other day at work, I was talking to one of my coworkers and he was venting to me about how he thinks he deserves a raise, which is a term that we use to describe an increase in salary. If your boss gives you a raise, it means that you've done something good and your salary is going to be increased. That's what it means to get a raise. So he thinks he deserves a raise, but the boss hasn't given him one. And so he was frustrated because even though he makes good money, he still spends so much time working. And now his wife's starting to complain about it. So in his mind, the only way he can continue to justify working so many hours is by making more money. So he can show his wife like, okay, I'm working all these hours, but I'm making more money for us. And I said, oh, she probably wants you to, be at the house and spend more quality time with her, right? And he said, yeah, it's that, but also we got kids, man. And she wants me to be present in the kids' lives because I mean, as I'm sure you know, once the kids grow up, I mean, there's no going back. So if you miss those key moments in their childhood, they're just gone forever. And I was like, yeah, man, that's true. And then I just let the conversation breathe, which is another way of saying I just paused for a moment. I just sat in silence. I didn't say anything. I took a moment to really think about what he said, and I gave him a moment to think about what he just said. Because it's important to remember when someone's talking to you, especially about something personal, they're also hearing themselves talk. It's not just you that's listening, they're also listening to themselves. And sometimes when you hear yourself say something out loud, especially when somebody pauses after that and gives you a moment to really sit there and think about what you just said, you end up thinking differently about what you just said. I hope that makes sense. So anyway, I let the conversation breathe for a few seconds. And what happened is what often happens, which is he said something else. I didn't have to say anything. I just said, yeah, man, that's true. And then we sat there in silence. And then he turned to me and said, man, you know, I've been married to the same girl since high school. I was like, damn, bro, what the fuck? Mind you, this guy's 31 years old and he's been married to the same girl since high school. So you can imagine my surprise. I'm like, damn, bro, for real? And he's like, yeah, man, most people react that way when I tell them I've been married to the same girl since high school. And so instead of asking another question, I decided to give my own opinion, my own perspective. And I told him that I simply couldn't imagine being married to one of the girls that I went to high school with. And I'm actually, you know, to be honest, this is me talking to him now. I said, to be honest, bro, having kids, it scares me a little bit. Because kids don't come with an instruction manual, dog, and everything you do matters. Your life revolves around protecting and educating these kids now. And not only that, but having kids with the wrong woman will fuck your entire life up. So I can't lie to you, bro. It scares me a little bit. And so after reflecting on what he said and giving my own bit of perspective or my own opinion, I asked another question. And I asked him, why'd you get married so young, bro? What inspired you to get married right after high school? And he said what had happened was he got his girlfriend pregnant. And she comes from a really religious family. So once he got her pregnant, in her family's mind, the next logical step was for them to get married and take the family thing seriously. So that's what they did. So I sat there thinking about it. I'm like, damn, it's crazy, bro. A simple decision, one action, one mistake can change your life completely. And that made me remember one of my siblings. And that's what I told him. I said, you know, one of my siblings also had a kid pretty young, and it was just so interesting to watch how their entire life changed just because they had a kid. And, you know, talking to my sibling all these years later, I asked them, like, is having kids worth it? Do you regret it? And they said, nah, not one bit. It's hard. It's, there are days when you want to kill the kid, but they still wouldn't change it for or exchange it for anything in the world. They love being parents, and obviously they love their kids to death and all that. And so I asked him the same question. I'm like, you know, what do you think about that? And he said, bro, I love having a dad. And matter of fact, we had another kid 4 years later. And I love this family thing, man. I actually think I became a better man after becoming a husband and a father. I think it really straightened me out and almost forced me to take life a bit more seriously. And we kept talking after that, but what I want to illustrate with that simple story is that all of that came about because I was listening when he was venting about being frustrated about not getting a raise at work. And then he mentioned his wife, and I'm like, oh, we're about the same age, bro. You're married? Let's dig into that. And I didn't even ask a question. I just made a simple observation. I bet she wants you to be home and spend more quality time. Then he said something, and I reflected on that. Then I said something. Then I asked another question, and he said something. You see what I'm saying? So if you need to, rewind a little bit and listen to that story again. And just notice who's asking which questions, who's making which statements, and when are those things taking place. And how easily the conversation can flow forward. I mean, I really hadn't talked to him that much before that day. We didn't really know each other before that. And now every time I see him, we talk. And so this is how simple yet powerful this technique is. If you just get good at listening attentively asking thoughtful questions and providing information about yourself, your perspective, your experience, and then asking more questions, you will see how simple it is to get a conversation going and keep it going with people who genuinely want to engage with you. Because again, it's not going to work with everybody. Not everybody's great at making conversation. Not everybody is going to be as interested or as curious as you. Not everybody is going to be in the mood to talk when you talk to them. But by employing this tactic, you give yourself a much better chance of making good small talk, and therefore a much better chance of going from small talk to a more interesting conversation. So try it out, man. Give this tactic a try for a couple of weeks, a couple of months, and see how it goes, and get your own feedback, make your own adjustments. And I guarantee if you just stick with it, if you get in the habit of making small talk to people, you'll become less anxious when talking to people, and you'll get better at talking to people.